Welcome everyone to a new Sigma webinar, this time to discuss delivering public administrative services in challenging times. As you know, given Sigma's mission, our focus will be on EU enlargement, potential enlargement, and neighborhood administrations. We are very happy for the opportunity to address explicitly this very important topic with the help of, as you will see, very relevant experts, government officials, and analysts. My name is Bruno Monteiro. I am at the Sigma Service Delivery and Digital Government team. You will learn a little bit more about the team in a bit. I just want to welcome you all for joining us on time, and I will very quickly share my presentation just to help me setting the scene for what we have today to discuss. We will have an opening remark from my colleague Nick Tick, that is the team lead for Service Delivery and Digital Government. It can set the scene also for the work that Sigma does that goes beyond the specific topic that gathers us today. And we are very, very pleased to have with us Guillaume Finn, that's the head of unit from the European Commission, that has a very, very relevant, not just overview, but I will call it very practical engagement with some of the areas where these approaches are more useful to be considered. Without further ado, because I really want to make the best out of the time we have today, I will hand it over to you, Nick. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Bruno, for, well, first of all, passing the floor, but also a big shout out to you for bringing, I think, this excellent group of speakers together on this very important topic for today. So big thanks, Bruno, for this. I will be relatively short in this introduction because I really want to give all the floor and the time that we have today to our guests and speakers, because I think they are the main actors today. Just allow me, dear colleagues, to briefly, for the ones online not fully knowing Sigma, just describe us a bit as a program, because I think on the topic that we're discussing today, I think it will explain a bit where we are coming from, what we are doing, what our mandate is, to also understand why we dedicate such an importance for the topic that we have on the agenda today. Sigma as a program, as you can see also on our background, is a joint initiative between the OECD and the European Union, principally financed by the EU. So we are hosted within the structures and also the buildings of the OECD. So we fully work within the governance directorate of the OECD, but we also work very closely with reports, but also work hand in hand in implementing the EU policies. So in this regard, we are working closely with our colleagues and friends in DG MENA. So great to have Guillaume with us, who is leading the unit over there, and soon we will, Guillaume, pass the floor, but also working with our colleagues in DG NS. And I think this really highlights our core mandate as Sigma, that we are now already more than 35 years supporting countries, for the moment working with 21 countries, installing, working, enhancing governance, public administration reform in all the countries. I mentioned 21. We are working in the countries in the MENA, so the Middle East and the North Africa region. So under the guidance and supervision of DG MENA in the Commission. And then we're working in the Western Balkans and Turkey under the guidance of DG NS. And also we're working in the Eastern Partnership region, again, also under the guidance of DG NS. All of this, as I said, in promoting, stimulating good governance, public administration reform, different areas going from policy making, policy coordination, service or civil service, public financial reform, accountability issues, and also the issue of what we call within Sigma service delivery and digital government. And this is the team that I'm leading, guiding together with Bruno and also colleague Jose is online, where we try to work on supporting the countries mentioned in the services that they deliver, the way administrative procedures are run, are smoothened, the way how services are designed, so everything when it comes to user centricity or human centric approaches, but also these days very much into all the aspects that has to do with digital. So I think this is a first link between the regions that we're covering, the countries that we're covering, the topics that we're covering, where we also bring these topics together. Today, with a very specific focus on delivering services under, well, call it difficult times. And we all are aware of the times in which we are living. In all the regions that we are covering, there are some very specific challenges that governance, that public administrations are facing. But I think there's one common denominator. They are all confronted with difficulties, with challenges. So I think the main thing of today, and I will not go too much into the content, is really to, I think, highlight the crucial importance of resilience of public administrations to, on the one hand, bounce back and to keep the shop running while it is not only under construction, but sometimes also under attack, physically even. So to keep serving the citizens, to keep serving the businesses under very difficult times. So to be resilient and to bounce back, but not just to bounce back, but also to bounce back better. And I think this is a crucial challenge for all of us. It's not only to keep things running, to keep things bouncing back, but also to rethink things, to also really to improve things and in doing things better while we are bouncing back from the difficulties we are facing. So with this, I would kindly hand back to you, Bruno, to then also introduce Guillaume. Thanks, colleagues, for everyone is joining online. Really happy to see also the numbers growing. Keep in touch with Sigma because this is not the first of the kind of events online that we're doing, and it will also not be the last one. So keep in close touch with us, and we hope to provide you with more interesting things also in the future. Thanks again. Thanks, Bruno.
Thank you so much, Nick, and I will build on your call for us to keep engaged after this webinar to also raise the expectations and say that, of course, Sigma is more than welcome to receive your questions, your challenges, and to, of course, pursue this collaboration throughout other formats as well, in complement to the activities that Nick was mentioning. Very brief practical notes. If you have any question, any comment, please use the chat, share those questions with us. We expect to have a moment to address those questions as much as possible after the panel interventions. And I will hand it over to Guillaume Finn from the European Commission. As Nick has said, it will bring a very, very relevant perspective on not just the collaboration with Sigma as a program, but also with the underground work that Sigma and AC and the OECD are doing together with these administrations. Guillaume, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Bruno, and thanks a lot to Nick as well. The EU has had actually a very long-standing partnership with the Sigma and OECD to the extent that sometimes when we talk about public administration reforms, we actually mention Sigma, and Sigma has become synonymous with public administration reform. So at least in the MENA region and also in the Eastern neighborhood, we have really a successful collaboration, and we have received a lot of very positive feedback from our EU delegations and also from the authorities of the partner countries. So we're very happy to continue that collaboration with you. I would like to also thank you for organizing this seminar. I also want to thank all participants. And as a matter of fact, this week, unfortunately, is the week of the Eid, which is days of celebrations in the Arabic world as well. So some of our colleagues are not connected. But voilà, I trust that's a first step, and there will be follow-up discussions on the matter. I see that we have other colleagues from DG NS as well, DG MENA, and a few colleagues from our EU delegations. Voilà, and thanks a lot for all your participations to all that the people who are connected. Look, Nick said it all. We are really going through challenging times. We all remember about COVID, and we have the energy issue, the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine. We now have the geopolitical conflict in the Middle East. There are lots of regional, local conflicts ongoing that we should not overlook. And probably the main issue there, it will be not only a short-term repercussion, but it will have very longer term effects and negative impact, probably for one or two for the next 2 decades. I would like also to talk about that. We talk about also a few generations. Look at Gaza, for example, where it will probably take a few generations to build back. Also, I'm also referring to the socio-economic fabrics and the psychological effects on population. So we are there for short-term impact, but also keeping in mind the long-term effects. And the second point is that it's not only challenging times in terms of poverty. You see that in the eastern neighborhood regions, mentioning Ukraine, of course, but also in the Middle East. We're not talking only about levels of poverty. We're talking about conflicts. We're talking about geopolitical conflicts, conflicts about resources, and these are taking a lot of casualties at the moment. Most of the countries we are partnering with at the moment are in extreme levels of fragility. And as I said, not only for economic reasons. So this is something that we should take very seriously. Of course, we are there to help de-escalating at geopolitical level. We're there to try to mitigate the effects. We are trying to facilitate solutions when it comes to geopolitical issues, but we also need to prepare for them. We need to be more prepared. We need to be better prepared for such conflicts, and that's a bit the main topics of the seminar today. Is how to prepare the countries, how to consolidate an approach that can be resilient enough for the country to adapt to the series of shocks that keep coming to them. And hence the whole difference between resistance and resilience which is the ability to draw lessons from the past to be more resistant to current or future shocks. We like also mentioning the figures of 1 to 4. When we invest €1 in preparedness, that may actually save €4 for damage mitigation when the crisis arises. So at the EU level, we're pretty much involved in trying to invest upstream, even on financial and economic terms. This is actually definitely worth it. We see it in Ukraine, but we see it also in Gaza, in Syria, in Lebanon at the moment. You have seen that in last March, so two months ago, the European Commission has come up with a formal strategy on preparedness, made of a list of 30 concrete actions. Now it has to go through the formal approval process. But this is a first attempt to be more prepared and to help countries being more prepared along the path that I've just mentioned. You will see, I will not detail that list of action now, but you can, I'm sure we will further discuss during the seminar. But it has a lot to do with business continuity in administrations to continue providing public services. It's also a bit wider. It has recommendations to build up people and business resilience, but also cooperation between all of us. So you will please go and see that that strategy. This has been a long thought process with consultation with various stakeholders. So I really invite you to go and see that one. Voilà. The Commission is really very happy to work, as I said, with OECD and with Sigma, with the main aim to help structure the approach that countries can adopt to keep delivering public services at the time of crisis. And among the actions, what we find extremely powerful is really peer exchange. It's lessons learned, but it's also peer exchange among us, among ourselves, among institutions, among policymakers, but also among implementing agencies, stakeholders on the grounds. And we can see from our experience in the region that the peer exchange are very fruitful to draw lessons and to be more equipped for the preparedness that I was mentioning. Just to finish here, and then I will hand over the floor. Is three things that we learned from our experience. First is the importance of foresight. Foresight is not just a gadget; it's an extremely important process that can inform the reflection on the programming of our actions, keeping in mind the various scenarios that can happen in the future. So that's something that OECD is plenty into it, and this is also something that the European Commission has started to work on quite seriously. The second one is digitalization, where we saw that in times of crisis, digitalization has turned out an extremely powerful means for the public administration. And we can quote the example of the DIA system in Ukraine, a web portal for public services, as a very good example in this respect. So that can be also an approach that we can discuss. And the third point is about transparency. I don't know if you remember the quote from the IMF managing director that was talking about, please, in times of crisis, referring to COVID, keep the receipts. And she was actually referring to the processes that should be in place by the governments when we go through crisis in terms of level of transparency, mentioning public procurement, exemptions or subsidies. It's also a matter of building trust and confidence with citizens, and we shouldn't forget that key fundamental pillar, that it also has to be there in terms of crisis. That's very important for the reconstruction process and the democracy building that comes after that. Voilà, I will stop here. I would like to thank you again, and I'm looking forward to the discussions this morning. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Guillaume. I think it is impossible to underestimate the stakes that we have at hand in the countries of our region to make sure that service delivery still addresses citizens and business needs, while of course keeping a robust governance structure in place. But I think it's also important to mention that there are all of these potential benefits in preparedness, in building resilience in the way we operate, that can be captured and translated in practice. So thank you so much for sharing those comments. Very briefly, as a way to set the scene for the conversation, I won't repeat some of the things that were already said, but I will mention very, I will say, self-evident truths that I think are still important to be mentioned. The first of them is that under strenuous circumstances, citizens and businesses still need services to be delivered. This is very obvious, and I will even say that more than ever, those services need to be in place. However, what we have been seeing is that acting constantly in an emergency mode is not the most effective way of addressing those needs. Preparedness systems and strategies to address those more or less unexpected circumstances are not always in place, which means that governments struggle sometimes to anticipate and to respond with the pace and to the complexities of this so-called crisis. The webinar today is precisely intended to share examples, gather learnings, nurture exchanges, as was already mentioned, with a way of stopping with a fatalist approach to crisis. If it is true that we cannot guess the future, we can get better prepared. We can be prepared not just by setting strategies, but also by building the necessary capabilities and by adopting the required flexible arrangements that will make governments to be, able to anticipate and to respond to those crises. Sigma gathered some of those learnings in one of the already mentioned crises that we have with the pandemics of COVID-19. So you can take a look at the initiatives that were done across the countries, the regions we just mentioned, and the idea was to consolidate those learnings. Of course, this is not something that was done once and for all. There are no, of course, silver bullets here, but there is a work where we are that we are eager to continue. One of them is to support context-specific responses to emergencies. While, of course, lessons and tools are not easily transposable from one context to the other, there is the possibility of adapting them to your context, of generating, tailor-made solutions and approaches for your country. And this is something that, of course, Sigma has been doing in the context of this OECD-EC collaboration. It is possible to move from reactive stances to proactive and prospective approaches. That means if we keep waiting to be hit by crisis to find creative, original, and even efficient solutions, always late in the way we deliver value to our citizens. So there isn't this possibility of building resilient systems that can keep answering with a more proactive, in a more proactive way. Then it is also important that when we address the support, we can focus not just on the immediate times of the crisis, but also on the whole cycle of resilience. That means it's important to resist the crisis, but it is also important to recover. It's also important to learn from that crisis, to have this retention moment where we can kind of embed those learnings, embed the solutions we found, and of course, to have an ambitious but realistic place to rebound from crisis. So it is important to cover all of this cycle. And I think today we organized the panel precisely to give you a sense of how governments, how experts are looking at these different moments. And of course, both the European Commission and the OECD have been doing a lot of work in this area. Strategic foresight was already mentioned by Guillaume. We will learn a little bit more about the Recovery and Resilience Scoreboard later. There is this thematical analysis for digital public services that was published in 24. And as you will learn also from our colleagues at the OECD, working specifically on strategic foresight, there are communities, there are support, there are resources that can be used. And very briefly, it's my biggest pleasure to invite some of the persons that are at the forefront of some of the things I just mentioned. So we will have Natalia Shamghai and Natalia Tkash, respectively the chairperson of the Ukrainian Association of the Administrative Delivery Centers and the deputy head of the center in Kyiv. Our colleagues will be doing their presentation in Ukrainian. You can follow up, if needed, the English translation by clicking in the 3 dots button at the bottom of your screen and choosing on interpretation English if you want to follow the presentation. Needless to say, how extraordinary is the work our colleagues in Ukraine is the work they are doing under very difficult situations, under these aggression conditions that we all know about. And as you will see, that do not prevent them of finding, I will say, effective but inspirational solutions. Then we will learn a little bit more from Tamer Karmut, that has been researching crisis situations in particular through the working group he's sharing on post-conflict and conflict situations. Tamer is an associate professor from the Doha Institute of Graduate Studies. That, I think, will also help us to find the perfect segue to the work that Peter Benksur is doing as scientific officer. Peter works at the European Commission in the Joint Research Center that, as you know, has been playing a critical role on the resilience approaches that the European Commission has been adopting. I won't unveil much more. I really want you to get first-hand account from Peter. And of course, finally, we will have Rafał Kierzenkowski, that is the head of the Strategic Foresight Unit in the Office of the Secretary General at the OECD. And I think he will give us the strategic vision of not just the methodological details about strategic foresight and how to use it, but also how strategic foresight can translate into decisions. How can we actually lever these approaches to inform better decisions? And I think this is a critical path for us to explore. I will stay here and I will invite Natalia Shamghai, Natalia Tkash to take the floor. Natalia, thank you so much again for joining. The true inspiration. Many, many thanks for today's presentation.
Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to see all of you, and I'm very happy that you pay so much attention to the experience of Ukraine in the crisis situation. And we are ready to share some of our experience. Now we will share our presentation on the screen. Should we do that, or do you do that for us?
As you prefer, Natalia. If you prefer to share it yourself.
Okay, then we will do that. Now we will share our screen. 1 second, please. I will start, meanwhile, telling from very general features. Since we are responsible for the provision of services from centers for the provision of administrative services, One second, sorry, we have a technical issue here on our side. And then we will start telling you our presentation. So the topic that we are going to discuss today is work in the during the pandemics and during the martial law, challenges and experience of Ukraine. The network of centers for the provision of administrative service of Ukraine consists of 5,404 access points. That is a very diverse network of centers for the provision of administrative services and centers of communication with citizens. It consists of 1,352 centers for the provision of administrative services, their territorial divisions, and remote workstations. Also, village leaders and mobile centers for the provision of administrative services are also involved into this process. But I would like to draw your attention to the fact that 5,000 access points, almost 5,500 access points, employ 14,000, almost 15,000 administrators, employees, who are responsible for the service delivery. Since we represent the city of Kyiv, I would like to point out that in Kyiv only, we have 25 locations of centers for the provision of administrative services, and right now we have more than 400 administrators employed. So the model of the city of Kyiv is a mini model of the country, because the city of Kyiv is divided into 10 districts, and they have their own administrations and infrastructure accordingly. Here, I would like to point out that we have quite a high level of satisfaction of our residents, of our users, with respect to the work of our centers. And in 2014, for example, this level of satisfaction was quite low. As you can see on the slide, it was 14% only. That was the period of establishment of centers, because at the level of the law of Ukraine, the centers were established only in 2012. In turn, in 2025, regardless of the martial law conditions, the level of satisfaction is already 94%.
With the beginning of the COVID, we realized that the center of work of TNAPS, the heart of work of TNAPS has changed, because the main threat was about COVID. And so there was a need to stop communication with each other in order to stop the waves of COVID going forward and forward. So what has been done? At the level of the Cabinet of Ministers, the resolution has been adopted. And so with introduction of epidemiological of quarantine in regions and across our country in general. It was March 2020. And then, based on this document, each region handled their epidemiological station ad hoc, depending on situation in each territorial community in each region. It means that restrictions were different across different regions in terms of access to public authorities and opportunity for transfer and traveling across regions. Then, on 18 March 2020, the work of the TSNAP in Kiev was suspended. So it was not fully closed, but it was limited. Yeah, of course, similar restrictions were imposed on employees of our TSNAP, and that's why the call center became extremely crucial. People called, they didn't know how they shall receive services, continue working, and so on. I will explain further how the consultancy worked during the pandemic times, during the martial law, because the number of call center employees who provide support to clients, they provide support not only in terms of documents, what documents shall be received, how the documents shall be received, how to use digital tools. They provide consultations and advices on any other topics, how hospitals work, how public transportation works. All those consultations were possible thanks to the database that we had already developed. This database consisted of different pieces of information regarding different types of services. Our employees have access to this database, and the exchange of information happens between different public authorities of national level and municipal level. Our TSNAPs do not provide services only in emergency stations. There are such services as employment license, ID card were issued, including birth certificate. All those three services were provided offline. All other services were reachable and accessible via the portal using a personal account of a client. Before registering personal account, consultations could also be provided. And online services from the state and municipal registers, so which were provided. They were provided using websites of the state authorities and municipal authorities. So such severe restrictions lasted for 2-3 weeks. Then those restrictions were softened, and we adapted to the challenge, and we elaborated an algorithm, a method, which was suitable for that epidemiological situation, considering the number of patients who were sick on COVID in our specific region. So we adapted to the situation. Now, as I've mentioned, the services that we have already provided, so issuing of the ID card of a citizen of Ukraine, registration of place of residence and deregistration of place of residence, and everything related to the driving license. So we focused our efforts at those services which were important, crucial, and there was no chance for those services to be cancelled. So there was also a need to interlink those services with other registers and agencies such as migration service or internal services of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. So our employees worked remotely, work meetings took place on Zoom, the same as online trainings, and we have also carried out a deepening process of studying legislation. Because if our employees work remotely, they have additional time, they cannot do a major part of tasks offline. They dedicated this time to trainings and learning of the knowledge. On 22nd May 2020, the acceptance and issue of documents by appointment began, and so there were certain rules how to access SNAPs, and it was electronic queue which could be used. So you shall book your appointment online and choose the relevant time slot. So disinfection of document intake and waiting areas were there. So personal protection equipment was obligatory both for employees and for clients. It was also important to preserve social distancing between persons in a line. And all administrative services were also accessible online. In SNAP premises, all disinfection rules were fulfilled in order to mitigate any risks and in order to prevent further outbreaks of COVID. All our employees took regular tests. And the resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine number 1276 as of December 2020 is also regulated how actual social distancing shall be done. And in all public authorities, social distancing shall be relevantly marked with at least 1.5 meter distancing between two individuals in a line. There were also other secondary legislation pieces which regulated working rules, including relevant tests that shall be taken by sick employees or those who are under risk or are suspected to have COVID. Here you can see the statistics that the number of services provided, administrative services, and in 2020s, this number was reduced one in 2021 when we finally adapted to the challenge. This number increased. Why is it so? Because first of all, there was a certain number of administrative services which people were unable to receive remotely. But at the same time, adapting to the challenge, analyzing how it shall be done, and developing relevant methods, we managed to increase the number of administrative services provided. Year 2022, again, this number is reduced. That's because of the start of the war. But you can see that in 2023, 2024, 2025, this number is constantly increasing. So it means that despite of the martial law, the number of services which is being provided by public authorities through SNAPs in our country is prone to increasing. So 24th February 2022, that's the day when the martial law was introduced, and the law on the imposition of martial law in Ukraine was adopted, and starting 24th February 2022, functioning of SNAPs was suspended, but specifically in those settlements which were under direct risk, and in those regions, for example, western regions of Ukraine, which were more or less safe, they have received an increased workload. Why is it so? Because we've had internal migration of people, and those SNAPs located in safe settlements provided a key service which was related to registration of the status of an IDP. IDP, that's internally displaced person in our country, and they also provided services related to humanitarian activities. In those settlements which were under risk, SNAP activities were suspended, but what's important registers for our country stopped working on 24th February 2022. So it was a full termination of access to such registers. And what registers actually were limited in terms of access and using it? That's real rights to removable property, legal entities and public organizations register, civil status records register, unified state demographic register, and state land cadastre. Then, in the month 25th March 2022, partially, some registers renewed their work. So yeah, you can see that for months only, those registers stopped working completely. But even during that 1 month, it became clear for us what we need to do, how algorithms shall be adapted. So the registers, which you can see on the screen, started working again. Then, regarding other strategic decisions which were made, as there was no certainty what will be next, but our country needed to keep living. Our businesses need to keep functioning. You see that just a few days after the start of the war, on 28th of February 2022, when the Cabinet of Ministers and Verkhovna Rada, they kept working and they started adapting legislation to current conditions. That's why a resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine on the suspension of deadlines for the provision of administrative services and issue of permits was adopted, and it means that helped not to violate any deadlines. We also needed to work with individuals, to identify different individuals when the full-scale invasion started. And here also we have certain important documents. And on the same day, 28th of February 2022, another resolution of the Cabinet was adopted. According to this resolution provisions, all the documents were in force even if the expiration date becomes over. So it means that representatives of the migration service, they needed to put a special mark or a stamp that the passport is prolongated for 5 more years. And those wording was done both in Ukrainian and in English for our citizens to be capable to cross the border. 6 months later, there was another resolution of the Cabinet adopted as of 18th October 2022 and another one of 28th October 2022. Those resolutions envisaged how passports shall be issued and who shall do it. That it can be done by agencies of the migration service located abroad, not only in Ukraine. Now, because such agencies of the migration service are located in 11 countries, and some other regulations related to passports.
Apologize for jumping in. It's just because I'm very much aware of timing. Maybe we don't need, again, to close the discussion today. All materials are going to be shared, of course, after the webinar, and maybe I can kindly ask you to try to converge to the closing of your presentation, so we have time to engage the other speakers, and also we will care very much about the questions at the end that may come from our audience. So we really appreciate the level of detail and the attention to the robustness of your presentation, but maybe we can focus on converging before we hand it over to the other speakers. Thank you so much, Natalia, for your understanding.
Yeah, then we will reduce the presentation. We just wanted to share all the details. So just important to let you know that our legislators adopted relevant documents, both the Cabinet and Verkhovna Rada, so it helped to renew provision of services, and statistics also improved thanks to those actions. Another element of our reality is that air raid alerts, and you see this wording on the screen, what are our limitations during shellings, and we have been living in this reality till now, so for us it's important to practice those algorithms during an air raid alert. If you're interested, we can share all the details, how we have equipped shelters for a call center to keep working, because a call center shall keep working even in a shelter. And those shellings also pose a risk to our energy system, water supply, power supply, heating. That's why for us it's extremely important to have alternative power sources and to practice, to test provision of services in a paper form, but when there is no electricity, when there is no power supply, and with a later introduction of data into electronic databases when the power supply is renewed. And we have also some new services which had not been provided before the war. That's e-recovery, that's also shelter program and compensation under this program. It's also an opportunity for a person to apply for an IDP certificate and of course, all the services for veterans, because we hadn't had such a number of veterans in such a category at large before the start of the full-scale invasion. What else do we do? So we have mutual help and this cooperation between different communities. We have modular mobile SNAPs. We help each other with such mobile SNAPs and services between different communities in such a way. We tried to renew funding of modular SNAPs, which are established thanks to international aid to Ukraine by other countries. We take care after our employees, we have different trainings for our employees on psychological resilience, communication with veterans, and first aid in order to help our employees to handle challenges and cover needs of our employees. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Natalia. I of course, am very sorry for rushing you into presenting these last measures, but I really think those last slides brought our amazing adaptation that you have been putting to responding to the war situation is playing positively in the ways citizens and business are being served. With taking way more time, I will ask Tamar to take the floor. Just to remind everyone about the 15-minute time for the presentations, and we are getting pressed on time. And to let you know that we will be sharing the presentations afterward, and we are happy to collect any kind of feedback or question that you want to share with us with a view of continuing these exchanges. Tamar, thank you so much for joining today. Very much appreciated your contribution and looking forward to hear from you.
Thank you, Bruno, for the introduction and also for the opportunity to be part of this exciting discussion. So I'll start immediately. In the next 15 minutes, I want to take you on a journey through 3 interlocking bodies of research I've been working on Palestine and Gaza, on Syria, and on public policy and public-private partnerships in the Gulf and the larger MENA region, and connect those findings to what I believe is the most urgent challenge for this community. How do we move governments from reacting to crises toward genuinely anticipating and withstanding them? So I'll ground everything in evidence from my published work in this research. So let me briefly walk you through the structure of my presentation so you know what to expect. I start with the why. Why crisis governance is an urgent and growing challenge, especially in the MENA region and the EU's neighborhood. I then introduce the conceptual framework that underlines my current book project, 5 interlocking dimensions of resilient public administration. From there, I move through 3 empirical windows, Palestine and Gaza, Syria, which I'm interested in now, and then the broader GCC and the MENA region, with a focus on the private sector and public-private partnerships as well. I then turn to what the EU and OECD can and should do definitely, and I close with 5 actionable recommendations. Let me start with what I believe is the fundamental problem. Crises do not discriminate. Pandemics, conflicts, climate shocks, and geopolitical upheavals all arrive precisely when citizens need their governments most. And they tend to expose the weakest points in public administration systems. In the MENA region, the vulnerabilities are compounded. More than half of states in the region are currently classified as fragile or conflict affected. Conflict affected states experience GDP contractions roughly 3 times deeper than stable peers during the same shocks. And the current US-Israel war on Iran is generating cascading fiscal pressures across the GCC and the entire globe, and renewed uncertainty over the Strait of Hormuz and also the associated and interrelated economic and political problems emerging from the current evolving situation. In addition, the Gaza Strip gives us perhaps the stark point. The UN and the EU now estimate that reconstruction costs at effectively $53 billion for a territory of roughly 2 million people. The key point I want to leave with this audience is this. These are not isolated cases. Every country in this room's enlargement and neighborhood agenda faces some version of these vulnerabilities and crises. The question is whether we invest in preparedness before the next crisis or scramble after it. The framework on this slide is drawn from my forthcoming book and from previous published work I co-edited and co-authored with many colleagues on public policy challenges and making in the larger MENA region. At the center sits the goal. The goal is, of course, resilient public administration. Around it, I identify 5 interconnected dimensions. First, institutional capacity. The quality of civil service, rule of law, and anti-corruption frameworks. This is the foundation. Without it, everything else fails. Second, service continuity. The systems, digital channels, and redundancy mechanisms that keep services flowing even when normal operations are disrupted. Third, and this is new in how I'm framing it today, private sector and public-private and PPP models, public-private partnerships models. I'll come back to this in detail later, but the core argument is that the private sector is not a luxury add-on to crisis governance. It brings agility, financing capacity, and technical expertise that states in fragile contexts simply cannot replicate alone. Fourth, partnership and aid architecture, and that's very important in the MENA region because many of the countries in the region are recipients of aid. The coordination between donors, civil society, and governments is a key important aspect. As my Gaza research shows, getting this wrong has catastrophic consequences. And this does not only apply to Gaza, it applies to Syria, to Yemen, to Sudan, name it. Fifth, strategic foresight, and this has been mentioned in the introduction of this presentation. The tools and practices that allow governments to anticipate crises rather than simply respond to them. This is where OECD's own foresight work connects directly with my research. The 5 dimensions are mutually reinforcing. Weakness in any one undermines all the others. Let me now turn to Palestine, a case I have studied intensively since my own time working for UNDP in Palestine and also during my time in academia, and which forms the core of 2 of my key publications, a book and other articles as well. The central argument of my publications is this. The international community, including the EU and the United States and all other donors, but the EU is most important donor here because it is the largest donor to the Palestinian Authority, used aid as a political instrument by boycotting the Hamas-elected government after its election victory while continuing humanitarian operations. Donors prioritize their own political interests over the development needs of ordinary Gaza, and also instead of seeking a political settlement or even enforcing and facilitating unity between Palestinians and focusing on reviving the larger peace project. So aid, when it comes without being attached to clear political conditions, it could also do harm. The consequences were concrete and severe. Routing funds through CSOs, civil society organizations, and UN agencies, while excluding de facto governance authorities on the ground, hollowed out state institutions, which are the outcome of a very generous aid program that started from the onset of the peace process. And I mentioned here all state institutions that were established with the help of donors to establish the Palestinian Authority and to pursue the peace process. Schools, courts, health services, municipalities, all were suddenly staffed by people without professional qualifications because donors helped sustain the Palestinian split more or less. So what I'm trying, or what I have argued in my publications, is that from the onset of the Palestinian split and the failing of the peace process, donors continued their engagement in Palestine, but this model was not sustainable and it was not a healthy model to generate peace dividends by excluding de facto governance structures on the ground. I also talk about the concept delivering aid without government in this context, mainly, and you can apply this context also to countries like Syria and Yemen to a large extent, where you have disputed governance structures, and Libya as well, where you have two governments, one recognized internationally, one not recognized internationally. So the key challenge is what would donors do in these particular circumstances. And I think this is the challenge, and this is where I come with the concept delivering aid without government. And I chose, for example, Gaza reconstruction efforts after the so many wars that Gaza has experienced. And I'm not talking about the last war, the genocidal war. In this case, the result was the reconstruction that proceeded in fragmented parallel systems of governance did not achieve the desirable outcome. At the contrary, it led to aid independence and also very negative outcomes. And you could also tie it to the eruption and re-evolving of conflict cycles, including October 7th attacks in Israel as well. So imagine if donors had a different modus apparatus in these contexts, maybe we would have different outcomes when it comes to the re-emergence of conflicts. Fast forward today, the UN and EU Gaza rapid need assessments now after the current unfortunate genocidal war puts reconstruction needs at $53 billion. A transitional board has been established, but as we talk now, nothing has materialized on the ground, and the challenge is still there. And this requires a revisiting the entire EU policies, at least when it comes to aid in Palestine. The EU and OECD implications are direct for the EU. Condition aid on coordination with legitimate local institutions, apply the OECD's own fragile states do no harm principles consistently, use Sigma standards as a benchmark, and insist that reconstruction is Palestinian-led, not donor-driven. And of course, this requires political will among EU states as well, which is questionable at this stage, despite the hope that many EU countries have took advanced political positions on the conflict by recognizing a Palestinian state. But the problem is, the challenge is how to materialize this on the ground. Okay, moving to Syria. Syria brings a parallel but distinct set of challenges. After more than a decade of devastating conflict, Syria's destruction is not primarily physical. The social fabric, the trust, the institutions, the sense of shared citizenship has been torn apart. And unlike some post-conflict settings, Syria had never had an independent civil society to begin with, so donors don't have real partners on the ground. Assad's rule extinguished it. Communities are genuinely ill-equipped for participatory reconstruction. The entire culture is not existent there. Several conditions must be met before meaningful rebuilding can begin. An inclusive transitional government, the one in place now, it's not inclusive, Syrian-led and internationally supported, yes it is, but to a limited extent, is a prerequisite for a meaningful reconstruction process. Without it, reconstruction becomes another tool for deepening divisions. Security must be guaranteed. Israel's continued attacks on Syrian territory after the fall of Assad are not only devastating in themselves, they signal to investors and communities that stability is not assured. The governance architecture matters enormously too. The lessons from Gaza is absolutely explicit here. Fragmented, politically motivated donor aid delivered without coordination and without local ownership deepens dependence and delays recovery. Syria needs a comprehensive reconstruction framework that aligns donors around Syrian priorities. And education. and I want to emphasize on this, is not a secondary concern. It is the foundation for rebuilding social cohesion. Syrians need to feel their suffering was not in vain. That requires not just roads and hospitals, but dignity, participation, and hope.
Amer, I will just call your attention for the timing. I'm sending a message in the chat, but it seems I'm not being successful. So thank you so much.
How many minutes do I have? Sorry, I did not receive the message.
I will probably invite. Well, if we stick to the 15 minutes, we have 3 minutes, I will say. So
I need 5 minutes exactly. I'll be back. Okay, so I'll jump. Okay, so I'll try to finalize very quickly. I want to make an argument here that I think is very underappreciated in how we talk about crisis governance. The private sector is not just a source of construction or financing. It is a strategic partner in building the resilience of the state itself. This is not an argument for privatization or for replacing the state. It is an argument that resilient public administration must include well-designed partnerships with the private sector as a structural feature, not an afterthought. That's very important. My research on GCC and the larger MENA region gives us diagnosis and a set of lessons. GCC states have been pursuing PPPs as a core plank of their economic diversification agenda, witnessed in all their visions. But my comparative research concludes that implementation is uneven, policies are often unclear, competition is limited, and the dynamics of frontier state where the government dominates and provide autonomy is constrained, makes sustainable PPPs structurally difficult. So, why PPPs are important, not even in stable and rich countries like GCC, but across the MENA region, which also faces many levels of fragilities and post-conflict situation. Here is where my contribution more or less comes. Most governments, including many in MENA and EU's neighborhood, currently sit somewhere between reactive and adaptive, a mood of response when it comes to crises. They respond to crises when they hit and learn some lessons afterwards. What Sigma's mandate and OECD's broader mission is unequally positioned to support is the shift toward the right side of the spectrum, proactive and prospective governance. That shift requires action in 4 specific areas. First, institutional strengthening and Sigma's framework on civil service quality, public service standards, etc., fit very well. I mean, and these could be applied in fragile countries like Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, and even Ukraine, which has been discussed. Second, crisis, and this is my something maybe that has been neglected, crisis PPP frameworks. And this is maybe something new, and maybe OECD can focus on it in the segment. The EU has experience with PPP standards and blended finance mechanisms. That expertise needs to be adapted for MENA governance realities, including frontier state dynamics like GCC, which I have documented, and deployed in contexts like Gaza and Syria, where reconstruction PPPs could be transformative. The aid architecture reform, the EU is one of the world's largest donors. Its aid practices in Palestine and in other countries also have to be more or less revised, and shifting to approaches where working and grounding the policies with local owners, it should become a priority. Last but not the least, so let me focus on, wrap it up with these recommendations quickly. Number 1, institutionalized crisis preparedness standards across EU enlargement and MENA neighborhood countries, and drawing on Sigma's proven frameworks and in previous crises like COVID, etc. There are lessons to be made here. 2, reform aid architecture for conflict-affected contexts, specifically in Palestine and Syria. The EU must shift away from the civil society model and political conditionality toward genuine state capacity building and locally led government. 3rd, develop and promote new crisis PPP frameworks. Work with GCC and MENA governments to design pre-agreed rapid deployment models. And that's very important. Inclusive crisis partnerships and reconstruction PPP vehicles with blended finances. The architecture for these can be developed now before the next crisis hit, because the private sector is very important. Even countries who are under embargo or siege have relied on private sector and private firms to overcome siege and uncertainty and even conflict in Gaza, in Iran, in Syria, name it. So the private sector is a very important player, the local private sector, with the innovation and the idea it has. Fourth, mainstream OECD strategic foresight in Arab public administration, partner with institutions like academic institutions like ours, the Doha Institute, the Arab Center for Research, IASIA, many local or regional institutes that has also to work and learn from and cooperate with OECD models and learn from the experiences in a shared approach or a common approach to respond to these crises. Five, and last recommendation, maybe establish an EU MENA knowledge hub. One could be centered in the GCC because it has a unique context, others in less developed, less advanced economies, and other in fragile countries because there is a need for a tailored approach to respond to crises because the MENA region is a very diverse region with very different economic and political contexts. It's hard to talk about it as a unified common region with shared interests or experiences. I'll stop here. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I look forward to your questions and discussions.
Thank you so much, Tamar, and points well taken about the possible path for collaboration that lay ahead for us. I think it's very important that also in the way we approach this challenge, we have a forward-looking way of doing it. Thank you so much. Peter, the floor is yours. Let us know if you need any support. Otherwise, thanks very much for joining. You just need to unmute yourself, sorry.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. I hope you're seeing exactly what you're supposed to be seeing. So I'll talk about resilience in policymaking. I'll try to make a case for the necessary capacities and how to evoke them ex post and also ex ante. So talking about resilience, talking about the work we did on resilience, it started around 2016, so 10 years ago, and the objective was to bring resilience thinking into policies. We first wanted to take stock of how resilience is actually addressed in policy making, and what we had to realize is that there was no common language. So we started to work on, together with Enrico Giovannini, what we then called as a conceptual framework for resilience, where the main building blocks were the following. So to focus on societal well-being, I'll explain that a bit more, to go beyond aggregate policies, to go beyond single policy areas, so to connect the various dots, to go beyond stability, so not only just absorption, stability, but flexibility. And we realized very important linkages with strategic foresight and also sustainability, sustainable development. And then to jump just a bit ahead in time. So in 2020, this framework and this sort of policy thinking was picked up by the inaugural 2020 strategic foresight report of the European Commission, which was on resilience. Actually, the decision arrived before the onset of the COVID crisis, but there was the unfortunate reinforcement of the case for resilience. So back originally, and I think it's also important to bear in mind, is we viewed resilience not only as a technical thing, not only as a technical narrative, but as a potential alternative political narrative, complementing and sometimes substituting strengths with flexibility. I think this remains true even now, or maybe even more. Foresight and resilience should enable the active shaping of the future through adaptation and transformation to benefit society and enable sustainable development. And I put here a picture evoking the bamboo tree and pointing to a speech from a Japanese senior politician in 2014. In winter, snow falls on the bamboo trees, they bend but never break, and come spring, and the trees start to grow straight again, which we believe is a very good illustration of resilience. Now, one of the most important ingredients in our thinking is what we call the system view, that you want to look at not just single elements one at a time, but to see things together. So we took a look at an extension of the material closed Earth system model of Costanza et al., where you start from the various capitals, which are then put together directly and indirectly in a generalized engine, in a generalized production process into into essentially well-being, which goes through consumption, but it also goes through other positive or negative outcomes like ecosystem services, social system services like trust or poverty. Consumption and investment, which then goes back to the capitals. And the point is that shocks can enter any place in the system and then they are transmitted. So the role of interconnectedness, the role of various propagation and amplification mechanisms, non-linearities, threshold effects after which there is no return or tipping points. These all make it to what was called in the second Stiglitz report as the system approach to the measurement of sustainability. So indeed, after the second Stiglitz report, also even the OECD well-being framework, which previously was only looking at resources for the future well-being as the four capitals, started to include risk factors and resilience, so that those resources which are to be passed to the future actually land there safely. So this is one important linkage between resilience and sustainable development. But there is another one, which I'll try to illustrate with this figure. Imagine you are in time t0 and the shock hits the economy, shock hits society, and you want to compare pass A and pass B. A looks better, right? Because there is a smaller decline in societal well-being and there is an almost complete reversal in relatively a short amount of time, while B drops more and doesn't seem to be coming back. But what I was hiding here is maybe later on you actually realize that the original path was no longer sustainable and it was heading to a collapse. And pass A was actually taking back you with minimal loss, but to that collapse path, while B realized and discovered the new sustainable development path. So the point here is when you're thinking about resilience, actually you want to assess the deviation relative not to the original, but to that one, which may differ from the original, which is the new or the original sustainable development path. So you have really these two-way linkages between resilience and sustainable development. So 2020, the Strategic Foresight Report made the case for resilience as a new compass for EU policies, arguing that strategic foresight should inform policies systematically with the view of strengthening EU resilience. It was looking at four interrelated dimensions. It actually was having a very strong transitions narrative, social and economic dimension, green, digital, and geopolitical. It was arguing for monitoring tools, which then led to the development of the resilience dashboards. And an important thing was not to have indicators about progress itself, but the ability to make progress, especially among difficulties and challenges, thinking of vulnerabilities and capacities. Let me make a quick historical detour of this measurement, how we were originally imagining to measure this, and then I'll have to say that this is harder than one would like. So we wanted to look at how a system, say a country or a society, behaves during a crisis, after a shock. So we looked at our system picture, we took various indicators and looked at how they evolved in the EU member states in the 2008-12 crisis. Then we looked at this behavior of how much they went down or worsened on impact, how quickly and by how much they recovered in the medium run, whether they eventually bounced forward. We put all these indicators of all the system variables together, which then tells, as this map with the blues and the greens on the right, of how different EU countries or EU regions were doing in terms of their crisis revealed resilience. Now, the problem is that these are variables observed during a crisis. These are not something which you can continuously monitor. So there comes the next step, which we call to search for resilience characteristics. Those observable features, capacities, buffers of countries or regions before the crisis, which are an important explanatory or predicting variable for good crisis behavior. This is what this other orange, yellow map tries to show, how the pre-crisis size of the welfare state, for example, was an important resilience characteristics. Now, ideally, this is how you would like to measure, but you have only 27 member states. Or if you add other episodes or other countries, still you will not be able to identify too many resilience characteristics. So the alternative, and this is what actually was underneath the resilience dashboards, is an expert-based approach where experts get together and say that in our experience, in our field, we believe that these and these indicators observed at the country level are good measures of vulnerabilities and capacities. So this is what we did in a year-long process within the Commission, then with member states. We identified more or less 15 indicators per vulnerability, per capacity for the 4 dimensions. So that's a total of 120. That's quite many. Then we created various summary measures for vulnerabilities per dimension, for capacities per dimension. And after a second year, we were pushed to create an overall vulnerability index and an overall capacity index. And the point is to sort of have a general view of how different countries are, but also how different within a given country the different dimensions and the different capacities and vulnerabilities are. Do we have maybe a negative relationship between capacities and vulnerabilities? Maybe a country has high vulnerabilities, but at the same time good capacities. Then it's not as bad as if it has high vulnerabilities and at the same time low capacities. How to support these capacities? This is another ingredient from our original framework, is to think about the intensity and the time or the duration of the various shocks and the necessary capacities and the various interventions which can support. So if a shock is not very intense and does not take very long, then we are mostly in the stability domain. We want to evoke the absorptive capacity. It's the bouncing back territory. But if intensity and duration increases, it may no longer be feasible. Then we want to enter the adaptive capacity, flexibility. And eventually, if the duration is very long and also very intense, even adaptation may no longer be possible, and we need a complete system change. We need to evoke the transformative capacity. Now, these capacities can be supported and actually should be supported by various policy interventions. In an ex-ante phase, before any shock comes, it's mostly prevention and preparation. When a shock hits, but we are still in the stability domain, their protection becomes something important because this is with which you can absorb. As you go from stability to flexibility, the intervention of promotion with which you actually give way and encourage the adaptation starts to play a role. And eventually, for a transformation, you need the transformative interventions, but that always needs to be matched with all the other interventions because transformations and transitions are very complex. Here I try to collect, and it's more for the records. I don't want to go through all the details of them. Some examples of these interventions, mostly thinking of the COVID experience, of what was preparation in that time. So to create various emergency protocols, be it buffers, examples of protection like the common EU shore mechanism, which even enabled moving funds between countries, various promotion, and maybe most importantly, a couple of examples of what I would see as successful bounce forward. Even in ex post, the spread of teleworking, online technologies for public and health services. I think from the case of Ukraine, we actually saw this in action. I think there were some long-lasting changes in the residential and the location choices of people. Now we can live further away from our work. New vaccine types, very revolutionary. Changed privacy security paradigms. Maybe in this we have even reversed, but clearly with all the mandatory vaccination and the lockdowns, I think we had to reevaluate what intervention we allow into our private lives by the state. And maybe last but not least, at a higher level, there was a massive shift towards more performance-based EU financing. The recovery and resilience plans and facility was very different than any previous EU funding mechanism. Something which we were emphasizing in this paper, Time for Transformative Resilience, is this notion of the I use the two colors, red and green, the team A and team B. Team A is the crisis management team, and team B is the bouncing forward team. So crisis should serve as an opportunity, not only to, as the bad opportunity to manage them, but also to learn, progress, and bounce forward. Obviously, it's a very difficult timing because you need to think about changes in the worst occasion when you're under attack, either literally or symbolically. But at the same time, they always give you a clear impulse for change. So in the EU, for example, if you think of the next generation EU, the common EU borrowing, the setup of the recovery and resilience plans and facilities, the Recovery EU, the considerations of the new multi-annual financial framework, these are all reactions to this impulse of change and in a sense the outcome of a team B type thinking. You need to be able to assess how much and where you want to bounce back and how much and where you want to adapt and transform, and there are no clear recipes for them. One thing which I think was a very interesting exercise done by the Italian Association for Sustainable Development is they looked at the Italian National Recovery and Resilience Plan, and line by line they assigned all them into these various intervention types from my previous slide. Actually, they also did that for the SDGs because this way you get a picture of the focus of these plans. And for example, they were concluding that there was too much emphasis on protection and insufficient emphasis on promotion and transformation. So they were saying that their own Italian plan was not bouncing forward enough. And things which all these
Peter, I will just play my role and remind you of time constraints. We are entering the last 10 minutes and we still want to have the chance of having Rafał sharing his
then
contribution.
concluded.
Thank you so much. And we have already received a very good question that I will let you all think about. So Ana Laranjeira shared the question about if there is any studies related with delivering services during climate change or earthquakes. I will let you think about that, but I will let you finish now and then I'll hand it over to Rafał. You will have time to think a little bit about that meanwhile. Thank you.
Okay, so just to give this one last example, that in the new EU fiscal framework, resilience was put sort of at the same level as sustainable growth and employment. So reforms and investments should be aiming at sustainable inclusive growth and resilience. And investment into resilience is one of the escape clauses for a member state for a slower correction of their fiscal pies. But this hinges very critically on new evidence and tools, and it is more an ongoing open agenda than a resolved question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. We will share the presentation and we look forward for the continuation of these exchanges. Rafał, the floor is yours. I won't lose much more time sharing beyond what I already shared of your role inside the strategic foresight unit inside the Secretary General office at the OECD. Thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you so much, Bruno, and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It's really a great pleasure to speak with you today about delivering public administrative services in challenging times. And many of you did mention the importance of strategic foresight. Administrative services are often described as the machinery of government, but for citizens, these services are not machinery. They are moments of life. So in those moments, people don't think in terms of ministries, agencies, or administrative competences. They judge the state by something simpler, whether it is present, fair, understandable, and effective. That is why public administrative services matter so much. They are one of the most direct interfaces between citizens and public institutions. They are where trust is either reinforced or weakened. Today, this interface is under growing strain. Governments are facing fiscal pressure, demographic aging, technological disruption, climate risks, geopolitical uncertainty, cyber threats, disinformation, and social polarization. These are structural shifts that will shape public administration over the coming decade. So the task is not only to make services faster or cheaper, the deeper task is to make them resilient, trusted, and future-ready in a less predictable world. This is where strategic foresight is highly relevant. Strategic foresight is not about predicting the future. It is a disciplined way of exploring plausible futures identifying emerging risks and opportunities, and using those insights to improve decisions today. Many administrative reforms still assume that the future will be a more efficient version of the present. Foresight challenges that assumption. It asks whether current systems would still work under different conditions: higher demand, lower trust, tighter budgets, workforce shortages, disruptive technologies, climate shocks, or simultaneous crises. For public services, this is operational, not abstract. A benefit system might work well in normal times but become overwhelmed during a labor market shock. A digital identity system may be convenient but vulnerable to cyber disruption. A care service may be well designed for today's population but unprepared for accelerated aging. The implication is clear: public services cannot only be optimized for the present, they must be stress tested against plausible futures. And this is why we need to move from a narrow service delivery agenda to a broader agenda of anticipatory public administration. Anticipatory public administration means designing services with uncertainty in mind. It means identifying mission-critical services, vulnerable groups, assumptions that may fail, and administrative systems that need more flexibility before the next crisis arrives. The OECD Strategic Foresight Toolkit for Resilient Public Policy is particularly useful for this purpose. It offers a structured process to challenge assumptions, create scenarios, stress test strategies, and develop actionable plans. Applied to administrative services, it can help governments test whether today's service models would remain robust under tomorrow's pressures: labor market disruption, rising care demand, cyber attacks, climate emergencies, or declining trust in automated decisions. The toolkit turns foresight into a practical method. But tools are not enough. Governments also need people with the skills, confidence, and institutional permission to use them. This is where the OECD Policy Foresight Training Program has an important role to play. It helps me to senior level decision makers and officials apply foresight methods to practical policy issues drawn from their own organizations. This is the kind of capability governments need if foresight is to move beyond expert units and become part of everyday policy and service design. The OECD Government Foresight Community Masterclasses complement this agenda. They give officials opportunities to learn from experts, exchange with peers, and stay connected to emerging practice. Capacity building is not only about formal training, it's also about communities of practice, shared language, and repeated exposure to new ways of thinking. Together, the toolkit, the training program, and the masterclasses show how foresight can become a practical capability inside the government, a method, a skill set, and a community of practice. Artificial intelligence makes this agenda more urgent. OECD foresight work on AI shows that AI is not simply another digital tool, but a source of uncertainty for economies, societies, and public administrations. The 2024 OECD Global Strategy Group breakout note on the futures of global AI governance explores how different governance choices could lead by 2035 to inclusive and shared prosperity, a more cautious and controlled future, a fast and furious future, or a future where breakthroughs backfire. This year, we released a paper, the name Exploring Possible AI Trajectories through 2030, and that paper adds another layer, setting out plausible trajectories in which AI progress stalls, slows, continues, or accelerates. The lesson for public administration is clear. Governments should not plan around a single assumed AI future. They need services that can adapt whether AI delivers gradual productivity improvements, rapid labor market disruption, new fraud and security risks, higher citizen expectations, or deeper concerns about fairness and accountability. AI can help classify requests, support case workers, detect anomalies, translate information, and anticipate demand. But it can also amplify weak data, opaque processes, and fragile accountability. This is why AI should be treated not just as an efficiency tool, but as a strategic uncertainty to be governed through foresight, capacity building, and clear public accountability. A foresight perspective adds a further point. Human needs will change. Aging societies will alter the profile of service users. Climate disruption will create new vulnerabilities. Migration patterns may shift. Digital exclusion may take new forms. The next generation of public administrative services must be designed for the disruption from the start. That means identifying mission critical services and their dependencies on digital infrastructure, cloud providers, payment systems, identity systems, local offices, call centers, and data exchanges. It means preparing for demand surges and fallback arrangements when digital systems fail. In practice, governments should define critical service guarantees so citizens know which services will remain available under severe pressure. They should adopt live event and no wrong door approaches, invest in sure public service infrastructure, build feedback systems that reveal bottlenecks and unequal outcomes, and make foresight a normal management discipline in service planning, budgeting, workforce management, digital investment, and risk management, as well as regulatory design. So the central message I would leave with you is this: challenging times require more better prepared administration of the present. They require public administrations capable of preparing for different futures. That means service designed around people, not silos. Digital systems designed for trust, not only speed. AI governed with accountability, not hype. Resilience built into services before the crisis, not improvised during it. And foresight embedded in the routines of government, not reserved for occasional strategy exercises. Citizens will not lower their expectations because the world has become more complex. Fiscal constraints will not disappear because demand is rising. Future shocks will not wait for administrative reform cycles. So the task is not to choose between better services and future preparedness. The task is to recognize that they are now the same agenda. To deliver public administrative services in challenging times is to build a state that can see further, learn faster, act more fairly, and remain present when people need it most. And with this, I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rafal. I think it was not just, I will say, a very fine-tuned presentation about the specific context of service delivery and digital government, which we appreciate you have done. But it was also, I will say, to reuse one of the expressions you have, no wrong door policy to help participants to reach out and to learn more from the resources the OECD has available. So thank you so much for this. I know that we are on top of the time, but if you have a couple of more minutes, I would like to share with you two questions we received. We received more questions, so the criteria is just the first to come, first to be served. So again, a question from Ana Laranjeira about delivering public services during climate change, crisis, or earthquakes. If there is something specific you are aware of or any case that you want to share. And then a very interesting question as well from Peter Madsen about what is the relative importance that the broader administrative context, in particular the culture of trust, the coordination, the preparedness within public administration has for this change in the way we deliver and we organize our services. This probably goes more that go beyond new tools and new approaches. So it's interesting to have tools and approaches, but how can we make sure this overall context can also change? I don't know if anyone from our panel can take the floor and wants to take the floor about one of these questions.
Maybe if I can jump in quickly.
Thank you.
Two quick reactions for both. For the first one, I pasted in the chat. Hopefully now I managed to send it in a way that it's visible to everybody. That there is a Commission/GRC Disaster Risk Management Knowledge Center with a web page with a supporting community of practice. It has both the direct crisis management, but I think also the broader how services and how life should continue under these circumstances. So I think that is probably a very good starting point, both for studies and also for practical recommendations. And on the other question, on the role of tools versus, I don't know, the general capacity or the general culture, although it's a bit abstract, but I would certainly sign up for the role of the general capacities and the culture. The problem is that it's always a bit hard to put your finger on it, what exactly it means. But I think that's the more important aspect.
Thank you so much, Peter. If anyone else can take the floor, it will be very much appreciated. Thank you.
Hi, Bruno.
Hi, Tamer, please.
I can reflect on the second question pertaining culture of trust and which comes first. I think both are very interconnected factors. I mean, what's most relevant, having a culture of trust or being prepared, having the actual preparedness to deal with issues or crises. I think both are interconnected, but to answer this, I think the starting point is to look at the context. I mean, we live in a very diverse world where we have diverse political systems, representative systems, and what matters is what citizens think and how they interact with their governments and whether citizens have a say in decision making or expressing their opinions or not. I'll talk about the MENA region per se. I mean, GCC countries are non-democratic autocracies, and most of them monarchies. They depend on rentier economies. They're very wealthy. They're able to deliver for their citizens' expectations. So when it comes to these type of services, the GCC is a unique case. But in other countries with different social contracts, of course, it becomes more problematic. I mean, the larger MENA region remains an autocratic region with lack of democracies, and I think there is a lack of trust in the system itself, in the institution, and this remains a big issue. How do we do reform in non-representative or underrepresented systems of governance? And this is a key question, not only pertains to the citizens of the region, but also external stakeholders such as donors, who are also committed to their own agenda and their own philosophy of helping others. Do we want to help an autocracy, or we want to minimize the engagement with an autocracy, a neighboring autocracy, to keep it stable so we're not affected? So it's a bigger question that involves politics, involves representation, public administration. We don't have a common answer. Context matters.
Thank you so much, Tamer. And that's exactly a very good point to make about the importance of having targeted, customized support. I'm not sure if our colleagues Natalia from Ukraine can tell us about the importance of also changing the administrative culture while preparing to deliver services under new circumstances. I'm pretty sure they have good stories to tell about this. Natalia.
In our opinion, it's very important to consider the human factor, and professionalism in the sphere is also very important in order to organize provision of services or to respond to any problem. It's important in this case so that practitioners and people who are responsible for governance and people who are responsible for academic side of things would have experience, so that they are professionally and competent, and so they would interact among themselves correctly. And it's also very important for them to help each other. And I think that this combination is a correct solution to any response. And the study of previous experience and development of algorithms that are already proven in practice also play a very important role. But taking into account those peculiarities, as the previous speakers mentioned, it's necessary to take into account peculiarities of the specific situation in a specific context, as well as specific needs that exist at that point of time. And of course, I would like to add here that, as previous speakers have mentioned, that's about engagement of the society into the conduct of the reform in a specific sphere in order to implement a specific solution. And for that, it's really necessary to talk to the target audience to understand whether it will be correct, convenient for use by the target audience. So that the services are delivered in a convenient manner. And of course, digitalization plays a crucial role in the process as well.
Thank you so much, Natalia. I think it's a very, very good point. I know that we have probably more interest among our audience. We are already 2 minutes ahead of beyond our planned time. I will kindly ask everyone to share their questions using the Q&A or the chat. We will promise to provide relevant answer as soon as possible. I am very much interested in sharing the last question and then closing the session. The last question we gather, it's the third and last we can discuss today, given the time constraints, is about the importance of building trust across different sectors in society, across different institutions, between the government and the citizens, if we want to have a more forward-looking view, right? We need to be aware that societies have cleavages, have divisions, and sometimes there is some work that needs to be taken considering this challenge. I don't know if anyone wants to take the floor very briefly before we close the session.
No,
Thank you,
perhaps
Mr.
one word. I think the trust dimension is absolutely key. It's actually the glue that helps our societies to hold together. But I think in this very complex world, it's also important actually to recognize the uncertainty, and therefore that we will not. The governments also don't necessarily have all the answers, right? I mean, and I think populations will probably appreciate that level of honesty, and often the good solution could be identified through the co-creation process. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rafael. And I like very much this message, so I think I will kind of rely on it before closing the session. Building trust is the glue for us to work together and to deliver more efficient, more human-centered public services. And the opportunities we have to rely on the experience of countries like Ukraine, but also of institutions like the European Commission, the IASA, and the OECD are extremely important in also building an enduring platform for us to collaborate in this area. This webinar was not meant to close the conversation. This webinar actually, I think, gives us a good argument to keep in touch, to keep working in this area, hopefully this time bringing on board a more interactive way of collaborating specifically for these interventions. Allow me to thank on behalf of everyone present to our speakers, to both Natalia's, to Tamar, to Peter, and of course to Rafael. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will be sharing your materials with our community. Please do expect some reactions and feedback from there. And I will again thank everyone that joined us today throughout these 90-something minutes. We hope we can keep learning from you, and we hope to receive new challenges from your side. This is an area, of course, where we will be keen in helping you finding the right contacts or even supporting you directly. Thank you again for everything. Hopefully to meet you soon again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Дякую, до нових зустрічей.
Thank you.
Дякую, до
Goodbye.
нових зустрічей.
Till new meetings.